So welcome, Dr. Sara Dill and Dr. Jessie Mahoney, and welcome to all of you who are tuning in either live or later on. We wanted to come on and share the stories of how Dr. Dill and Dr. Mahoney came to find mindfulness, practice it, and now teach it. So Dr. Dill, would you like to go first in terms of giving us a little bit of background about yourself and your mindfulness journey?
Sure. So I am a practicing dermatologist, pediatric dermatologist, and I teach mindfulness and I coach physicians. And it's always interesting to try to sum up what was a very messy journey, right? It felt like I was doing it all wrong. And I don't know, I didn't know what I was doing. I just knew I was really unhappy. And I kept trying new things, new jobs, new places to live, new everything. And on paper, my life looked pretty good and it just didn't feel good. And that is really what led me to sort of all of it. It's what led me to coaching. And then coaching really involves a lot of mindfulness. I didn't realize it. It's awareness, right? It's starting to become aware of your own thoughts and your own emotions, about tuning into your body and sensations in the body, everything that I practiced not doing as a physician intentionally, right? To sort of cope with stress that I didn't know how to cope with. And I didn't realize that I was also contributing to my own stress in those sort of unhelpful coping strategies. And then so after I sort of was involved in coaching, I then took a formal mindfulness course, mindfulness-based stress reduction. And it really appealed to me because it's not like woo-woo. I mean, I have a wall of books behind me. I've read all the woo-woo stuff. I like all the stuff, but I love science. At heart, I'm like a scientist. And although I'm interested in some of the more spiritual aspects of it as well, just personally, I like to understand why it works from like a scientific strategy. And then I just saw how mindfulness is a very simple technique to find peace in the present moment, regardless of what else is going on in your life. And I just found that incredibly useful, and I still do.
Thank you, Dr. Dill. And how about you, Dr. Mahoney?
So I'm going to just take a spin right off of what Sara said, which is to find peace in the present moment. And I think that's also how I came to mindfulness. So I am a pediatrician. I'm also a mom of 3 boys who are now 24, 20, and 15. And the other thing you said that resonated with me is messy is beautiful. And so as a mom of teenagers and a physician, and I have also been married for a long time, and a few years ago, life got really messy. And that was where I came to mindfulness. For me, I went back to yoga, basically just to get some deep breaths. I had always been into yoga off and on, but wasn't a regular yogi, as I would say. I would go to it when I needed it. And so I showed up and just started by taking one deep breath at a time. And what I discovered is as I took more deep breaths, I could breathe more deeply, I could think more clearly, I could be more present. And right around the same time, and for me, I think they actually happened almost at the same moment, so one did not lead to the other, I also hired a coach because life was messy and I didn't really know what to do. And so I ended up doing yoga all the time and doing my coaching. And by the end of my coaching, I found myself so transformed by these 2 tools together that I ended up doing yoga teacher training and coach training. And my coach was like, well, maybe you should do one and then the other. And I was like, nope, I'm doing both. Like, this is working for me. And it's interesting, I hadn't even thought about this until just this moment, but that for me is why I so believe in putting the 2 together, because I don't think they can be separated, because one really creates space and then the other one is sort of, what do you want to do with that space with intention, and how do you notice what's there, and really being intentional about being non-judgmental, which for many of us as physicians is very challenging. And so I think what I loved about it is the mindfulness part is very spacious, and you can take the breath and you can be present. And it's funny, Sarah mentioned science, and I'm like, well, I'm really glad the science is there, but for me, it's about the feeling, like it's the relief and the space and being able to breathe. So I love that there's science behind it so that I can like justify it. But for me, it's that when I sit down and begin like the yoga class or begin the breathing or begin some mindfulness practice, it just shifts everything in almost an instant and allows you to see things you couldn't see. And so that's how I came to mindfulness. And then all the mess that's there actually looks beautiful rather than tortures you.
And both of you happen to also be coaches. And I know both of you apply mindfulness to your coaching for your clients. Can you tell us a little bit about how you do that?
Sure, Jessie, do you want to start this time? And then I'll,
Yeah, sorry.
whoever goes first gets to say, like, I don't know.
It doesn't matter. Either one is fine. I bring them both at the same time because I feel like the mindfulness is the noticing and the being aware and the seeing, and a coach helps you see it. But if you haven't had any exposure to mindfulness, I feel like you don't have the space to be able to see. And so many of my clients come because they already do yoga, many of them. So because I'm a yoga instructor, I think we bond on that level. But a lot of them have never done any mindfulness. And so it's introducing them to the idea of this spaciousness and accepting and allowing and being rather than doing. And what does that look like? And so then part of it is teaching the mindfulness and allowing the space and creating an opportunity for people to really see what's happening inside. I've been sharing actually this week this book that this friend gave me, and they talked about how all we could see, you know, we could only see the outside, but everything that's happening is happening on the inside. And so mindfulness is about seeing what's happening on the inside. And the mindfulness allows you to connect with it, and then a coach kind of helps guide you with what you want to do with it. And so that's where I bring them together.
I completely agree with what Jessie just said. Of course, I think that sometimes it seems like people have this idea that mindfulness is like some like special skill that you have to cultivate. And I think the cultivation is in like bringing yourself into that awareness of like noticing what it is that you're doing or thinking or feeling or whatever, but that we all have it, right? It's a natural human ability to, and it's actually a really unique ability, which is to think about what we're thinking or to think about what we're feeling, to think about whatever, to like step back and be the observer of our experience. And I think just even toggling with that brings such, it just brings a little snippet of relief sometimes, because it gives you, it just starts to create that space, even if there's not a lot of space between whatever you're observing and what you're feeling, right? And so I think I think coaching isn't possible without that. I think that you can either make it very clear that this is actually what it's called, that sort of technique, or you can just sort of demonstrate it by asking questions and making it sort of less mysterious and less, again, it's not like woo-woo or anything, but like less, less woo-woo maybe, right? Like just more like mindfulness is just being aware of like what's happening with you and with the outside world and with all of it, right? It's just that it's sort of like shining a flashlight on whatever you're looking at, your own mind, your own body, the outside world, other people. It's just starting to get curious. So I think for me, mindfulness and curiosity are always sort of a part of it. And I think coaching sort of requires that implicitly. And it is just creating a bigger and bigger space for me between sort of the whatever's happening and then your ability to respond to it. So it's like building that muscle of responding instead of reacting, right? And that's what mindfulness-based stress reduction talks a lot about, right? That is the sort of stress reduction, is choosing your response as opposed to just automatically reacting.
And you mentioned,
Can I add on to that for a moment? I just
Yeah,
want to
of
add on to something you said, which I think is just so key for people who maybe haven't gotten into mindfulness yet or are thinking about it, that it's not hard, right? It's something you do and it's a practice. And so I think many people feel like, oh, it's this complicated thing. And yet you just start by starting, and it's not, I mean, you were getting into, well, is it complicated? Is it the coaching? What comes first? You just show up and do it. And we can all do it in our own way and grow and learn. And so to me, it's one of the things I love about it is it's so accessible. And yet it feels so inaccessible in our world. And so how can we make it more accessible and talk about it and allow people to experience it in just a really easy way?
And being mindful doesn't mean that you suddenly like channel inner peace all the time, right? You can just be mindful that right now I'm really irritated, right? And right now I really want to lash out. Right now I have all this like emotion and it feels like a storm in here. That's mindfulness. May not feel great. Sometimes it actually feels worse when you start doing it too, right? And coaching brings that up. People are like, why do I suddenly feel worse? Like, probably because you already felt terrible and you just weren't aware of it, right? It's like bringing it all out. It's great.
Bringing it out is powerful, right? When we shove it in, it ends up coming out anyway, and perhaps the ways we don't want. And so I think that's true for coaching too. Sometimes people feel like, oh, I'm getting coaching, I'm supposed to be happy all the time.
Right.
That's not true. You can be intentionally unhappy or intentionally frustrated. You know, for me with like the wildfires, I didn't want to be happy about it. I wanted to be angry that the world is too hot and everything is burning up and I couldn't see the sky, right? But when you're choosing the anger, it feels very different than just being like overwhelmed and frustrated and out of control. And so I think that's both mindfulness and coaching actually really allow that intention, which is what I love about them.
So going along this theme of kind of like misconceptions about mindfulness and coaching, are there some that you have encountered in both of your journeys in teaching that you'd like to address and kind of demystify or de-woo-woo eyes?
I know. I'd like to say that I don't think, like, I have some friends, I don't think mindfulness or a meditation practice or coaching are necessarily for everyone, right? Like, or maybe not for everyone at every time, right? I have friends who I tell them I go off on, like, in the olden days when I could take a week-long silent retreat, which for me is like such a beautiful thing. And you have to do chores, right? Like to like work on things. They're like, what are you talking about? That sounds awful, right? I don't try to convince them that it's like for them. I did originally, but now I don't, right? Like, so I think mindfulness, I will say, I think mindfulness, the ability to have some self-awareness is a helpful thing for everyone to cultivate. And you might want to approach it in a different way with different people, right? Having a meditation practice, a sitting practice is different, right? You can be mindful without doing any meditation at all. And I think sometimes lumping those in together maybe is like an error that I see, right? That the meditation practices are like a formal practice, which for me strengthen my self-awareness and my concentration. That's really what I see them for, but that they aren't necessarily the same thing too. And it's not necessarily for everything that's wrong too, right?
So I will tell you, a silent retreat would not work for me. I had to do it once for 24 hours and it just didn't work. And so I guess my thought about mindfulness also is that we all have our visions of what mindfulness is or should be. And there isn't one right way to do it. And so I think a lot of people think of us, you know, with their fingers in yoga mudra, sitting there peacefully, and everybody's version of mindfulness is different. And so if there is a myth that there's a certain right way to do it, that would be my thought, is there isn't a right way to do it. And there's a zillion ways to live a mindful life. And we all need to kind of figure out what we need. And so I guess my thought is it is for everybody, but it looks different for everybody. And you mentioned that, like, we all need to be more aware. And I do think our culture out there is teaching us all to not be present. And we actually do need to be present. Like, we're missing out on all the moments looking for some goal in the future. And I think that might be my myth about coaching, is a lot of people feel like it's really goal focused, and it can really be kind of a mindful exploration of who do you want to be and how do you want to show up, and finding yourself if you're feeling just a little bit off track, connecting with who you are. And the other myth is, I think a lot of people come to coaching when either they want to get to a certain outcome or they feel like something's really wrong. And I think one of the places that you can get the most benefit from coaching is when there's something not really wrong, but you're just like wanting to be a better version of yourself, or you wanting to grow. And that both mindfulness and coaching can be an incredible tool in that case. And I often, I have these teenage young adult boys who are all about, sports performance and this and that. And all of those people use mindfulness and coaching. And so the idea is like, can make you into a better person. And I, of course, tell them that all the time, which isn't that there's one better or the other, but it's like, how can you grow yourself? And so I do think that it's a beautiful opportunity that way. There doesn't have to be something wrong. You don't have to be in crisis. And that this is just a way to, optimize your life, make it better.
Mm-hmm. And I do think mostly it's suffering, right? That leads, at least for me, led me on the path of like self-discovery and self-help and right, all of that. And though the more you do this, I feel like for me, at least, I like listen to the whispers now. That's always my sort of metaphor. My life doesn't have to shout at me anymore, right? Before it like took a lot. And then sort of discovering this. So I like your idea that coaching and mindfulness, right? You don't have to be like super stressed out or really upset to do it. It's just a skill set that can improve your life, or allow you to better tune into your own life, right? And your own wisdom, and give yourself permission to do whatever it is that you want to be doing or not doing.
And one thing you just said just sparked this thought also, it's we often think we're okay, and then we do the mindfulness and the coaching and we see like, oh, actually this is the direction I really want to be going in. And so it allows you to see things that were in there, that things going on in the inside that we just don't take the time to see because we're so busy and just moving through life kind of on autopilot and missing the things in there that we really truly want to be exploring.
I'm going to switch gears a little and ask you both to tell us about the science behind mindfulness and coaching.
Well, I can speak. So the science around mindfulness, there's a lot of it. There's an interesting book called Altered Traits, and it actually it's written by a longtime meditator and I think a PhD or MD, who's done a lot of research over the years for many decades. And he actually talks a lot about how originally a lot of the research was sort of poor quality, right? It wasn't randomized controlled studies. It wasn't a lot. And so the research is getting better and better. But a lot of it too is that, there's different kinds of mindfulness. I like the research on mindfulness-based stress reduction because it's a standardized program, is often a little bit easier to compare. But I think there's also a lot of very interesting research now looking at changes in the brain where they can use functional PET scans and different ways of imaging the brain in real time in people who have a meditation practice or in people who don't, or in novices. So people that didn't have a practice and then took an 8-week mindfulness training intervention. And then you can actually see measurable changes in activation in some areas or not. One of my favorite studies, I think, involved like a pager. So it must have been a while ago, where you got paged multiple times during the day to ask if your mind was wandering and how happy you were. And basically it showed that the wandering mind is an unhappy mind, right? When your attention is on what you're doing in the moment, mindfulness, you generally have a better mood, which in my mind is like, well, okay, that's pretty much sums it up, right? Wandering mind, unhappy mind. So building the muscle of attention, right, and concentration, which a lot of meditation practice also does, but just mindful practice, all of it, that's sort of where the research points itself to. And then there's all sorts of research on, the default mode of the brain and all sorts of things. So I think it's really exciting. And again, for me, because I don't know, I think I work with a lot of skeptical scientific people and I get those people, right? That is my people too. Like, I like it, but I can talk woo-woo if I have to, right? Like I've done the woo-woo too, but in the end, I'm pro science.
So I would add 2 things. One, just there is actually a fair bit of emerging science on the benefits of yoga and health. And so not so much neuroplasticity, but I have a favorite book called Yoga as Medicine, and have given a CME talk on like the the health benefits of yoga. And I think many people look at restorative yoga as a health benefit, or people with chronic disease. How does it help people with low back pain? Or how does it help people with high blood pressure? How does it help people recover from cancer? Certainly there's a lot of research. But in that book, there's actually a chapter on like every kind of health condition and all the ways, and it has a huge bibliography of all the studies. And so there is a lot of science around why these tools can shift your physiology, and they shift your sort of reactivity and your parasympathetic nervous system. And I think for those of you who come do yoga with me, we do talk about like the breath and noticing how it changes when you start breathing. And so that's different than, say, the traditional mindfulness-based stress reduction, but it also has a lot of benefits. And so that's where I get to maybe all the different kinds of mindfulness bring different benefits. And many have been studied and many will be studied. And I think I have a good friend who's a psychiatrist who's also trained as a yoga teacher where I did. And she actually goes to India every year. And they apparently have tons and tons of science around yoga and the benefits of yoga that's published there, but not published here. And so she's like, no, there's even more. So just interesting to think that I think we have so much information, and yet we often choose not to see it around something like that. So my first message would be that yoga also has science behind it, even for many of us who may or may not think that that's true, it does. And then the coaching evidence, there is a lot of evidence. I'm not going to say a lot. There's evidence for the benefits of coaching, specifically for physicians, around decreased burnout and improved quality of life and decreased emotional exhaustion. And so last year was the first sort of landmark study that was published in JAMA about that. And I think it was like a 19% decrease in burnout. And the others were less noticeable of those two. Those were the three things that they studied. And then this year, actually, there was a new randomized controlled trial that showed some similar benefits. And so there are more and more studies being shown. Those were done on group coaching, not necessarily one-on-one coaching, but I think as coaching is becoming more mainstream in institutions and in training programs, that we are collecting the data to show that it makes a difference. I will say, you know, there's a lot of anecdotal data as well. And I think many of us who are coaches and who work with fellow physicians and non-physicians, like we see the transformation that people undergo. And almost everybody who is a coach also gets coaching and got coaching to start, and that's how they got into it. And so I think that that's where we do also, you know, there's anecdotal data, but for the science folks, there are studies, and there's definitely that 2019 JAMA study, and then there was a recent randomized controlled trial that came out in 2020 with some more data to support that. So.
Great, thank you so much for that wonderful, concise summary. As our time together comes to a close, there are many, many international, national mindfulness teachers now, and also coaches now. And I feel that I'm noticing more and more that are coming into this space. And so what are some of the unique characteristics about you and perhaps working with you that you'd like to share with viewers that you bring into your mindfulness teaching or your coaching?
I can go. That's a hard question. Even though I knew you were going to ask it, or something similar, sort of. I think there's just something, you know, when you're around someone and you sort of click with them or resonate with them, you just sort of know it or not. And so I would say generally, I think a lot of people that I work with, or that I love to work with, are really hard on themselves, because I used to be really hard on myself and I'm not at all anymore. And I have the ability to hold that space for people, even when they're being hard on themselves, and just sort of gently, I'm just sort of, I don't know, I feel like I'm clear, but I'm gentle in a little bit. I'm not like super harsh, because I've had enough harshness from myself. Towards myself. I also really like people who are sort of scientific and skeptical, right? I love answering questions. I like asking questions. And yet I also think that the need to always understand and to ask why and to like get so involved in that often will keep you stuck, right? From the experience of it. It's like the need for our mind to understand it is often a way of blocking the actual experience of it. And so the experience of mindfulness, you can talk all you want about it, but it's like trying to talk about the taste of honey. You should just try the honey, right? You're going to have your own experience of it. So talking about mindfulness and talking about meditation is well and good, but the actual experience of it, and that's why I like MBSR, because it sort of talks a little bit about it, but it's very experiential, right? You immediately start with the experience of it. Also, so you get over your fear of like, I don't know how to meditate correctly, right? Like I can't keep my mind straight. Like, welcome to the world. That is the experience of meditation. Your mind is all over the place. So I like people, well, I don't know if that answers your question, Ni-Cheng.
Yeah,
It's a
absolutely.
hard question too. It's always hard to like figure out. It's the question of like, oh, who are you? And then I think we all struggle with that a little bit. And I love the idea of fit, because to me, like when you feel like you connect with that person, and so we try to put ourselves out there and share. And I think people who, you know, with whom what you write or what you say really resonates, those tend to be the people that I really connect with, because we've connected over things. I think for me, I also tend to be, I like to think of myself as like the compassionate coach, not that other people are not compassionate, but I do really come at it from this, that's what I really need in life, is this sort of like, there's a solution, but I don't want to be badgered into the solution. I want to be sort of gently nudged into seeing things that I didn't see before, because I'm hard enough on myself as it is already. And so helping people see what's out there and see possibilities. I'm really into relationships and connections, and coming from the sort of place of love and place of compassion for everybody. I think a lot of people come to coaching from like relationship struggles and they're really angry at the other person. And in the end, right, the solutions come from finding compassion and understanding. And because staying angry at them, it could be all their fault, but you're going to stay angry at them forever then, and that doesn't serve you, right? So it's this sort of open willingness to engage in it. And I think the other piece that, for those of you who do yoga, I think with me, I come from this sort of like practical, accessible space where I don't want mindfulness to be complicated. I don't want yoga to be complicated. I want everyone to be able to get what they can get from it. Maybe it's because I grew up in Berkeley now. I'm like, it's this kind of individual funkiness, you know, but I do believe that like we all come to things very differently. And so we all have a different path, whether it's a different path in mindfulness, a different path in yoga, a different path in coaching, because there's no exact right way to do it. And so I really love just the exploration in it and discovering who you are. And like these, my husband told me at one point, coaching is kind of like helping people find epiphanies. And so it's like this, like light bulbs go off, and it's that part's so much fun. And so kind of just being that guide for people is, I do like to have fun with it too. It can't be too serious, because it's just important in life. I think I spent much of my life missing the fun, like just pushing through, doing all the things I was supposed to do, and this is the next thing. And so for me, like coaching is not just that. It's like about discovering what's out there and discovering I'm going to go back to the beauty in the mess, right? And discovering what's inside, because there's really nifty stuff in there when you take the time to look at it. And so enjoying that process.
Is there one tip you'd like to leave viewers with about mindfulness or coaching?
I would say that it's relatively easy to do, right? Like often I always feel like, oh, I need to do it right. I'm not gonna do it well, right? Like you actually, it's not something you can do wrong, right? Mindfulness again is just this sort of awareness. And I guess coaching, you can use coaching against yourself. That would be the one wrong way to do it. And when you coach yourself to believe something that you don't really believe, right? Or something. But otherwise, again, it's always just sort of, I like the idea of like the light bulb moment, right? Or whatever. It's like Oprah's aha moment, right? Same thing there. It's sort of a way of softening into your own experience. Again, with that curiosity, and I like playfulness, all of that. But like, you can do it, right? It's really not, and we're here to support you, or other people are here to support you too, right? It's not like people have gone ahead of you. There's a path.
My thought comes, actually, it feels like not my usual thought, but I'm going to go there anyway, because that's what popped into my head when you asked the question, which is like, just do it. I hear so many people hemming and hawing about, now is not the time, I'm going to do it later, or I'm going to do this first and then that first, or my mindfulness first and then my coaching first. And I will say that personally, I hesitated for a long time and struggled for a long time. And so I see it as like this, both of them together as the solution to stopping all the unnecessary struggling. Like, life is full of enough struggling, and 2020 is full of enough struggling, and who knows what's coming in 2021. And like, so this idea of like, well, I have to find the perfect this or the perfect that, like, just try it and see. Because I also think we maybe have an idea of, oh, it's going to help me with X or it's going to help me with Y. It helps you with a jillion things, and your whole life just kind of changes, and you may become somebody, not that you're not already amazing, but somebody even more amazing, somebody that you wouldn't even recognize the things you discover. And I think we hold ourselves back. Maybe, I'm not even sure it's out of fear, but just, we hold ourselves back because we want to do it right. Or we need to find the perfect place, and I would just say, just jump in. Like, people don't jump into MBSR. I know last round, I don't have enough time, or I don't have this, or I'm going to miss a session. Like, just jump in and give yourself that gift and see what happens. If anything, this year has sort of made it clear to me that like, life is short, and we want to show up for it the best we absolutely can, because who knows what's coming next. And these are tools that they change you. And they change your family, and they change all the people around you. And like, the more people who can struggle less and show up more whole for the world, the better off we'll all be. So that's my thought.
Thank you. And I wanted to invite viewers to work with both Dr. Dill and Dr. Mahoney in our upcoming formal mindfulness-based stress reduction course. I'll be co-teaching with Dr. Sara Dill starting on next Sunday on October 18th at 1 p.m. Pacific, and concurrently working with Dr. Mahoney on the Mindful Healers Platinum package, which includes what was just talked about with regards to combining mindfulness and coaching in a more formal, intentional way. So thank you so much for tuning in. I will leave links in the comment sections, and if you have any questions at all, feel free to private message any one of us or to post the questions in the comments. So thanks for watching, and hope to see you soon. Bye.
Bye.
Bye. Thanks.